Every story needs a villain. And in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the villains are often the most interesting part. Heroes, for all their ideals, are defined by the people standing in their way. And in the MCU, nobody stands quite so tall or so menacingly as its rogues gallery. If you rewind to 2008, the MCU's first antagonist wasn't a space warlord or a god. It was Obadiah Stane, a bold executive in a suit played to perfection by Jeff Bridges. His plan? Steal Tony Stark's company, and, if necessary, Tony himself. There were no armies, no mind control, just boardroom scheming and a big metal suit built in a cave. This set the tone. MCU villains didn't need magic at first. They just needed ambition, jealousy, and maybe a little extra hardware. Not that ambition was lacking. As the universe expanded, so did the villains. Next came Loki, the Asgardian god of mischief, whose talents included sarcasm, betrayal, and an unerring instinct for self-preservation. Loki had something the early villains didn't: charisma, charm, and a full dramatic arc. One minute, he's trying to conquer Earth with an alien army. The next, he's making quips and aligning with heroes when the situation suits him. He was the first villain to be loved as much as hated, maybe even more. The MCU, for a while, maintained a certain formula. If your hero is a man in a flying suit, your villain is a man in a bigger flying suit. Ironmonger, Whiplash, Yellow Jaquette were all funhouse mirror images of the protagonists. But even as the villains multiplied, they began to change. Enter the Winter Soldier, a living weapon rather than a madman. He had a metal arm and a blank stare, forced into villainy by control rather than choice. His story was tragedy, not malice. But no MCU villain looms as large as Thanos. Introduced with a smirk at the end of the Avengers, he spent years in the background, watching, planning, collecting jewelry. When he finally arrived, he didn't simply want riches or power. Thanos sought balance at a scale few could comprehend. To him, half the universe had to die. Why? Because, in his view, it was mercy. The brilliance of Thanos was in the method. He pursued his goal with calm confidence, murder and genocide treated as logical necessity. When he won, it didn't feel like a victory for evil, it felt inevitable. Heroes don't always triumph. Sometimes, the villain snaps his fingers, and everything changes. But the MCU's villains weren't all cosmic despots. There was another kind, Vulture, in a battered winged suit, cleaning up after superheroes, just to make a living. Adrian Toomes was enfolded by circumstances, a victim of the destruction left behind by heroes. He turned from salvage worker to criminal mastermind because he was pushed aside by bigger, richer men. Vulture didn't want the world, he just wanted a piece of the pie. And then there was Kill. Eric Stevens had no interest in universal domination. He wanted justice, or at least revenge, for his father, for himself, for Wakanda's forgotten children worldwide. His violence was personal, a mirror to systemic suffering. Killmonger's argument that the powerful have a responsibility to the powerless struck a nerve. When I saw he'd bury me in the ocean, it was clear he was the kind of villain you disagreed with but never dismissed. Not every villain worked. Sometimes you get Malekith, leader of the Dark Elves, who wanted to unmake the universe because it was too bright. Or Caecilius, whose eyes dripped magic, but whose motivations were as thin as the binding of an ancient spellbook. But even the forgettable villains served a purpose. They gave the heroes something to punch, and the audience a brief moment to wonder what it all meant. The MCU loves to redeem, too. Wanda Maximoff started as a villain. Her grief and pain made her cruel. Bucky Barnes was a puppet. Loki, once again, slipped between antagonist and anti-hero, always staying one step ahead. Sometimes, the line between hero and villain is only as clear as the day's script. By now, the MCU's universe is overrun with villains. Some threaten planets. Some threaten what? There's Zemo, whose superpowers are patience and psychological warfare. There's Hela, goddess of death, who wanted the throne because she thought it was hers. Ghost, who wanted to survive. And Agatha Harkness, who just wanted Wanda's magic. For every hero, a villain. For every punch, a count. In the end, MCU villains are not just obstacles. They're reflections. They show us the cost of power, the pain of loss, the danger of certainty. Sometimes they win, sometimes they lose. But without villains, there's no story at all. So here's to the villains of the MCU. Mad, tragic, charming, and always necessary. They show us not only what the heroes stand against, but what they stand for. And in every ending, no matter how triumphant, there's always someone, somewhere, waiting in the shadow for their turn to try.